Hi, my name is Gina. This is my very first video and it's St. Patrick's Day, hence the green tutu. I want to welcome you to this channel and explain what you can expect from the videos here and how they will benefit you. I did type and am reading this from paper for this first video. Most of my videos won't be prepared in advance, but I felt it was necessary for this first video so that I could fully convey the message and don't leave anything important out. So let's begin. To date, there's not exactly a specific 12-step group geared towards healing from toxic relationships, although many of them apply. I assume that if you're here, you have either been in or are currently in some sort of relationship with a toxic person, be they a narcissist or socio or psychopath, or some other form of psychologically disordered person, or an alcoholic or addict. Everyone has heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but because of the anonymity and one of the traditions of 12-step programs, even 85 years after its conception, the program remains shrouded in mystery to those who are uninvolved in them. I had an immediate family member who spent 15 years in AA, and in all those years I knew nothing more than that they went to a meeting once a week to meet with other people who were also alcoholic. It wasn't until a handful of years ago that I began to discover this entirely magical world of 12-step program, recovery, and how much it had the capacity to change my life if I was willing to do the work required. I feel that I should start by telling you that not only addicts hit rock bottom, and the majority of people who end up in 12-step programs have sunk pretty low. I can tell you that for everyone, the circumstances of rock bottom are all different, but if they come into a 12-step program on their own recognizance, it's generally because they minimally feel extremely cornered and don't know what else to do. I'm going to speak a little about my own experience to explain to you how I ended up in a 12-step program, which ties into why I know that this program can help anyone who needs it for recovery from toxic relationships. So here's my story. I had been in a relationship with an alcoholic man for a couple of years. It was a guy I had been friends with for years and had always had a thing for. The relationship had been difficult, to say the least. If you'd asked my alcoholic, he'd have told you that things were fine, that we were a good match because we never fought. This is true, and he was right, which was very confusing because in hindsight, he lacked the ability to commit and had poor communication skills. This is slightly comical now because, how had I not noticed or been able to verbalize such simple concepts as a lack of commitment or a refusal to communicate? But I couldn't. Now I know why. He avoided confrontation to the point that if I'd even hinted that I might be upset about or want to talk about something, he would leave immediately and I wouldn't hear from him for days and later weeks and sometimes months. Over time, I understood that I was to accept things as he would have them, and I was to have no negative feeling of any of it. If he could so much as sense disappointment in me, but he was gone. Some of you may be wondering why on earth you would stay in that kind of relationship. If you're codependent or have been in a trauma bond, you can understand exactly how such a blatant display of disrespect can even begin to occur. It was a fairly gradual buildup and went undetected to my own disordered naked eye. Every once in a while, I would try to exert some sort of boundaries, and it would lead to a full discard for weeks or months. I probably would have ended it much sooner had I known he was narcissistic, but I didn't know that. But what I did know was that he was alcoholic. I've always been around alcoholics. I've always loved alcoholics, or loved people who were and are alcoholic. They weren't always the best at showing love, but I grew up knowing that my alcoholic people did love me. Between that knowledge and my well-intentioned friends and family always reassuring me that my alcoholic boyfriend did indeed love me and he was just sick, and he himself telling me that he loved me and just sucked at showing it, and also reminding me that he was sick, I believed that was the truth. I loved him immensely. One of the times he vanished, I came into contact with somebody that I had dated on and off for many years and began spending time with him. It was a genuine yet horrible attempt to try to break from my alcoholic emotionally. Like clockwork, the time came for him to make his return, and I was like a puppy greeting my owner after a long out-of-town trip. I hadn't seen him for a couple months, and my severe levels of stress, anxiety, and sadness were immediately gone and replaced with feelings of love and happiness, and the general disease in the pit of my stomach that was often there when we were together. I became pregnant that day. As crazy and yet unsurprising as this is, I never had any thought that anything else would happen after that, other than that we would move in together, possibly get married, and together raise a child. The alcoholism I could deal with as long as he committed to the relationship. Again, I was used to alcoholics. And he wasn't an angry alcoholic. He was really like happy-go-lucky drunk. So it wasn't intolerable. He moved in and ended up leaving when I was 4 months pregnant after demanding that I got rid of my beloved pet. Because at 2 years into our relationship, all of a sudden he decided that he was allergic to my pet. This was a pet that I'd had for years before he and I had even started dating. Needless to say, it wasn't going to happen. I loved him, but I couldn't turn my back on a commitment that I'd made to another living being to take care of, especially knowing that this was a test, because I knew that this was a test of whether or not I would sacrifice my pet for him. It actually disgusted me, but I was also in severe shock and depression that he would leave me pregnant in the first place. So the remainder of my pregnancy, I only saw him a handful of times, mostly when he met me at my birthing classes and a few times that he came by. All of these times he treated me and the entire situation as if he'd never even left and wasn't absent. He talked some of the future, referred to me with his term of endearment for me, just he was there, he had never been gone, he was there every day. But even though he'd be gone for weeks and in between, or many days or weeks in between, when he saw me, it was I just was with you yesterday. And this was very confusing for me. Most of the days of my pregnancy, I spent balled up sobbing for hours. I felt physically like there was an actual knife in the middle of my chest. For the sake of not getting too involved in the story today, I'm going to sum it up by saying that the second that I went into labor, my life was going to get infinitely worse than my pregnancy had been, starting with the most traumatic event of my life, which was my entire labor and hospital stay, and continued with a series of horrific and unbelievable events over the course of the next year. Invariably, not only would my daughter and I be discarded, what I would eventually learn of the level of cruelty just goes way far beyond my mind's ability to even process as a realm of possibility. I was not only abandoned by the man that I loved and the father of my child, But I would begin to learn of the malicious way that it actually went down. I was alone with our infant and dealing with postpartum depression, which I couldn't even get help for because I was simultaneously dealing with CPS, in part as a further attempt by my ex to destroy me emotionally via adding injury to insult. Dealing with copious amounts of stress, sadness, and despair, beyond heartbroken, depressed, and in complete and utter agony. Death was the most welcome of thoughts. By the time my case with CPS had wrapped up and deemed me a safe parent for my child, the high levels of cortisol from stress that my body had been constantly producing for a couple of years at that point, coupled with my inability to take my medication for my multiple sclerosis because I was breastfeeding, I relapsed with lesions in my brain that severely affected my ability to walk, talk, and see. Additionally, my infant daughter was extremely high maintenance, and I was emotionally and physically inept. I did nothing during this time except for take care of her 1 second at a time. She was the only thing that existed in my world, whether I liked it or not. I had dropped all of my pregnancy weight and then some. Between her not letting me put her down and my lack of physical ability at the time, a shower every few weeks and possibly months at a couple of points was the most care I was capable of for myself. I wasn't eating if for no other reason than that I didn't have the physical energy or the ability to stand up for more than a few minutes at a time. Very few people wanted anything to do with me at this time. My depression came out as anger to anyone who did come around. So most people just stayed away. My mother was the only person that could help me with my daughter, but I think that even she just wanted to avoid me as much as possible, and was also possibly kind of frightened by the severity of attention that my daughter required. I hope that this paints a little bit of a picture of what it was like for me when I finally, nearly literally, crawled into my first Al-Anon meeting. I had known for a while that it was over. I was done. The only reason I had not to end my own life was because my daughter would have nowhere to go, no one to go to. She would go to the state, and even if she did have someone to go to, I just couldn't do that to her. Her dad already had. I couldn't and wouldn't abandon her. The fact is that all I wanted was death, and I didn't even have that option. That first meeting, I just sat and sobbed. These people told me of the 12-step promises, and they told me that I could be happy no matter what would transpire. And the thing is that I knew that they were telling me the truth. I think I had a pretty reasonable outlook on it. I knew it would take work and it wouldn't be quick or easy, but that I could eventually get out of the depths that I had been living in for so long. For the next couple of years, out of desperation for change, I transferred all of my expendable energy into my recovery, into a couple of different 12-step groups, and into learning about the diseases of alcoholism, codependency, and eventually various psychological disorders, including narcissistic personality disorder. I often spent 8 or more hours a day listening to program and studying. I did anything that was suggested of me and anything I heard someone else say that helped them. Slowly, I began to retrain my brain to implement the things I was learning into my life. The process was as gradual as my takedown was. I couldn't see or feel my progress from day to day, but over the course of months, I could begin to look back and see that things were changing. My reactions to things were changing. My attitude, my outlook, everything was changing, and I was slowly but surely climbing out of this hole. I began to learn how and why I ended up in the hole in the first place. 12 Steps is a journey of self-discovery, and more will be revealed. I'm learning who I am, and knowing who I am, I know that I like me. By the time I reached 1 year in program, I could look back and see that 1 year had done more for me than 20 plus years of therapy combined did, and it only cost $1 per session. On this channel, I intend to use a wide variety of 12-step literature, primarily Al-Anon and Coda, as it relates to narcissism and other toxic people, including addicts and alcoholics. My videos may include, but not be limited to, the daily readers, following discussions of a reading, discussing a specific topic or question as 12-step relates, discussing of a slogan, ideas, sharing of experiences, discussion of steps or traditions, answering questions, asking questions, etc., etc. If you're a 12-stepper of any group with recovery time, I'd really like to ask you to stay and give back what was so freely given to you, and do service by sharing your experience, strength, and hope with any newcomers here, as we know that the program cannot thrive without the symbiotic flow of both new and seasoned members. I think it's important that I explain why I feel that it makes most sense to use Al-Anon literature to address narcissism. We know that everyone possesses some degree of narcissism, and that it's even healthy to exhibit some. We also know that narcissism, like autism, is on a spectrum of severity, and that too much of it is not a good thing for people involved with that person. The fact is that active addiction causes a person's narcissistic tendencies to increase. It's safe to say that the overwhelming majority, if not all people active in addiction, are higher on the spectrum of narcissism. We know that people diagnosed with NPD, malignant and pathological narcissists, are very high on the spectrum of narcissism. The majority of these people with clinical narcissistic personality disorder are active in addiction. To put it simply, most addicts are narcissists, and most narcissists are addicts. Addicts who do not meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder will likely recover from narcissism once they become sober with a 12-step program. They also should not be tested for NPD until they have been sober for some amount of time, because narcissism and addiction look and exhibit such similar traits. I spent a lot of time trying to establish whether it was a case of the chicken or the egg with my alcoholic narcissist. For many reasons that I won't get into in this video, I now firmly believe that he would meet diagnostic criteria for NPD, whether or not he was sober for a significant amount of time. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous refers to addiction in part as a disease of selfishness and self-centeredness, a disease of the mind, body, and spirit. All of this said, I think that we can all pretty much agree that addiction induces narcissism, and that both of them are disease of the self, and therefore create a lot of the same issues in interpersonal relationships. This is why that even though I was not aware that NPD was in play in my relationship at the time, that Al-Anon, a spiritual program for those affected by the disease of alcoholism, pulled me out of the depths of what I now know to be narcissistic abuse. Some, if not most people, are put off by the fact that 12-step programs are spiritually based programs. It's sometimes difficult for people to understand that there's a vast difference between spiritual and religious. I think it's helpful to understand that even Bill Wilson, the creator of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was the first 12-step program, was pretty much agnostic at the point that he himself began working on the program. You don't have to believe in God to begin working a 12-step program. All that is asked of you is that you keep an open mind. The rest will fall into place. If keeping an open mind to a solution to your current problems that includes a spiritual answer is an impossibility for you, I can tell you now to skip this video and skip this channel and move along. Perhaps you'll find another way to recover, and I wish you luck. For someone like me, I was out of ideas, and I was willing to do anything to get better. Keeping an open mind was my only option if I had a chance of surviving. I know now that what is taught here about a connection with a power greater than myself is necessary and true, and it's one of many topics that I will help those interested here build on. If you are feeling trapped, lost, confused, hopeless, I urge you to find a local 12-step group that you qualify for. There are many groups, and I would suggest starting with a group that you feel best applies. Any 12-step group will invariably teach you how to address your issues. If you're mainly struggling with dealing with a toxic relationship or person, I would suggest looking for a Codependence Anonymous or CODA group near you. Because currently there may not be a face-to-face meeting close to you, you may also want to try Al-Anon or Narc-Anon if your person is also an alcoholic or addict. These groups will all address issues of codependency. If you qualify for no other group than CODA and you can't find a meeting or are for some reason unable to make a meeting, there are meetings online for CODA and all other 12-step groups. Newcomers in Al-Anon are told to attend 6 meetings before making a decision of whether or not to continue to attend. But my personal opinion is that in any program, you go to as many meetings as possible, no matter how much you do or don't want to, until you want to go. I recommend committing to at least 1 hour of program a day. This can include any or all of the following methods of program: in-person, online, phone meetings, reading any conference-approved literature, talking with your sponsor or another active member of the program, working the steps, or listening to the story of someone in the program on YouTube. This is a great option for when you're commuting to or from work, or if you're cleaning your house or, whatever. You can search on YouTube for speakers for your program by searching Al-Anon speaker, CODA speaker, AA speaker, etc., whatever program speaks to you. Obviously, this channel will be another option for listening to recovery. I would like to finish this video by reading the 12-step promises. Please understand that millions of people since this program's conception have come to see for themselves that the word promise here is not an exaggeration. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. The feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. If you are curious about embarking on a 12-step journey of recovery and self-discovery, please consider subscribing to this channel. I will be posting videos addressing different topics of narcissistic relationships, so please also consider the notification bell if the content interests you. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm really excited at the prospect of you joining me to start a brand new and much needed 12-step group. Let's make history.